We are following breaking news out of Hollywood. Bruce Willis has announced he is stepping away from acting after being diagnosed with aphasia.
Stunning news out about one of Hollywood's biggest A-list stars. Bruce Willis is putting his career on hold after being diagnosed with the neurological disorder.
Basketball, explosions, heroics. We all thought we knew Bruce Willis, the man who never blinked in the face of danger, the smirk that made New York tremble, the voice that could sell 1,000 lines without ever raising it. And then, suddenly, that voice went silent. March 30th, 2022. The world learned that Bruce Willis, the actor, the icon, the untouchable, was stepping away from the screen.
Big announcement from Bruce Willis's family this morning. An Instagram post says the actor will be stepping away from his career.
Not because he chose to, not because he grew tired, but because a disease had begun to steal the one thing that defined him: his words. Aphasia first, then frontotemporal dementia. This isn't a story about Hollywood. It's about mortality, about the fragility of the mind, and about the man who spent a lifetime fighting everything: poverty, doubt, even a childhood stutter, only to face an enemy that words couldn't defeat. So the question is, how do you honor a legend when the very thing that made them legendary begins to vanish? This is the untold story of Bruce Willis, and it begins here. Bruce Willis diagnosis. Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. The announcement didn't come from a press release or a studio publicist. It came from Instagram, from his daughter Rumor's account, addressed directly to Bruce's fans. To Bruce's amazing supporters, as a family we wanted to share that our beloved Bruce has been experiencing some health issues.
The family of Hollywood action hero Bruce Willis revealed today that he has dementia. Willis, now 67, was diagnosed last year with aphasia
and has recently been diagnosed with aphasia, which is impacting his cognitive abilities. And then, as a result of this, and with much consideration, Bruce is stepping away from the career that has meant so much to him. Within hours, it was everywhere. Every news channel, every feed, and the kind of story that stops people mid-scroll. The statement was signed by his wife Emma Hemming Willis, his ex-wife Demi Moore, and all 5 of his daughters, Rumor, Scout, Tallulah, Mabel, and Evelyn. 2 women who in any tabloid version of this story would be framed as adversaries, standing together in the same sentence, on the same page. And if you understood nothing else that day, you understood that this family had built something real, something that no amount of fame, divorce, or distance had been able to completely break. His daughter Scout, the day after the announcement, wrote, "Yesterday was so surreal, sharing something so personal. I didn't know how it would be received. I'd hoped for some love and compassion. I truly never could have anticipated the depth and breadth of the love we received as a family yesterday. The internet, which is usually a very cruel place, for one moment wasn't. Now." Most people who saw that post had to Google the word aphasia. And that's not a knock on anyone. It's just an honest truth about how little we talk about what happens to the brain when language begins to leave. Aphasia is an acquired language disorder. It doesn't touch your intelligence. It doesn't erase who you are. It affects a person's ability to process, use, and understand language. Speaking, listening, reading, writing, all of it.
Aphasia is an acquired communication disorder. It is caused by an injury to the language centers of the brain.
Imagine having a thought fully formed in your mind, clear, complete, real, and being unable to get it out of your mouth. The thought exists. The feeling exists. The bridge is just gone. For most people, That would be devastating enough. For Bruce Willis, who had spent his entire adult life mastering the bridge between thought and expression, who had built every single thing he had out of the way he used words, that word lands like a verdict. Then came February 16th, 2023, 10 months later. His family posted an update on the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration's website, confirming the next chapter. Bruce's condition has progressed, and we now have a more specific diagnosis: frontotemporal dementia, known as FTD.
Dementia is a problem of the elderly, right? Generally that's true, but there is one form of the disease that can strike people when they are very young, in their 20s or even their teens. It's called frontotemporal dementia, or FTD.
While this is painful, they wrote, it is a relief to finally have a clear diagnosis. Read that again. A relief. Because that's what it's like to watch someone you love change in ways you can't explain. You almost want the diagnosis, because at least then it has a name. At least then, the enemy has a face. FTD is the most common form of dementia for people under 60. And because getting the diagnosis can take years, it's likely far more prevalent than we know. As of today, there are no treatments proven to stop its progression. No cure, no reversal. What FTD does is particularly cruel in the case of someone like Bruce. It targets the frontal and temporal lobes, the parts of the brain that govern not just language, but personality, judgment, behavior, the very architecture of who you are. Unlike Alzheimer's, which typically begins with memory, FTD often starts by quietly rewriting the person before anyone around them knows the manuscript has changed. Emma later said that when she finally received the diagnosis, they were sent away with no guidance, no hope, no roadmap, and she had to search the internet just to figure out where to begin. Here is the thing that keeps me up at night about all of this. For years before that Instagram post, years before the word aphasia entered our vocabulary, people close to Bruce had already been watching the lights dim, slowly, quietly, in the way that only the people who truly love someone are the first to notice and the last to admit. But to understand what was truly being lost, you can't start in 2022. You have to go back to the beginning, to a boy who understood silence long before any disease introduced it to him. Early Bruce struggles. Walter Bruce Willis was born on March 19, 1955, in Idar Oberstein, West Germany, to a German mother and an American soldier father. When he was 2 years old, the family moved back to the United States, settling in Carneys Point, New Jersey, a working-class town that didn't have much to offer except toughness and the kind of humility you don't choose but absorb. His father was a factory worker, his mother a bank clerk. There were 4 kids in a small house, and money was always the background hum of anxiety that never quite went away. But there was something else Bruce was dealing with, something more personal and more isolating than poverty. He stuttered. Not a little, significantly, severely enough that normal conversation was a minefield. You know what it's like to have something you want to say, to feel it burning in your chest, and have your own body refuse to let it out? That was every day for young Bruce. School was humiliating. Social situations were something to be survived, not enjoyed. Other kids, because kids can be brutal in the most casual ways, he made sure he knew about it. So he went quiet. Not the quiet of someone who had nothing to say. The quiet of someone who'd learned that speaking was dangerous. He became a watcher. He observed. He internalized. He built this interior world where all the words he couldn't say out loud lived and breathed. And then, almost by accident, he found a way out. Community theater. Something strange happens when you put on a character. The stutter, his stutter, largely disappeared when he was playing someone else. There's actual science behind this. Stuttering is deeply connected to self-consciousness and anxiety about speaking as yourself. When you're voicing someone else, a different part of the brain takes over. The fear loosens its grip. For Bruce, acting wasn't a hobby. It wasn't even an ambition, not yet. It was relief. Well, it was the first place in his life where his voice worked, where he was fluent, where he could be heard. He later said that acting saved his life. I believe him, not in a dramatic, hyperbolic way. In the most literal sense, it gave him a reason to keep opening his mouth when everything in his history was telling him to stay quiet. The voice he built after high school, Bruce Willis did what most kids from Carney's Point did. He found work wherever he could. He guarded the Salem nuclear power plant. He shuttled factory workers at the DuPont chemical plant in Deepwater, New Jersey. These weren't temporary detours. For most people born into his circumstances, these were the destinations. But something in him wouldn't settle. He enrolled in the drama program at Montclair State University, the first real bet he placed on himself. And then, in 1977, he made a decision that took either tremendous courage or a little bit of madness. He dropped out in his junior year and moved to New York City. He landed in Hell's Kitchen. And if you know anything about Hell's Kitchen in the late 1970s, you know it wasn't the gentrified neighborhood it is today. It was raw, loud, and unforgiving. Exactly the kind of place that either breaks you or sharpens you. He bartended at spots across Manhattan, Kamikaze, Cafe Central, Chelsea Central, keeping the lights on while he chased auditions that mostly went nowhere. But here's the thing about Bruce behind a bar. According to actor John Goodman, who knew him before either of them were famous, Bruce was the best bartender in New York. He kept an entire joint entertained all night. He just kept the show going. Think about that. The kid who once couldn't get a sentence out without his voice betraying him, now holding a room. Every single night. He appeared in his first off-Broadway play, Heaven and Earth, in 1977, and then kept grinding through bit parts and background roles. He was an extra in Paul Newman's closing courtroom scene in The Verdict in 1982. Uncredited, invisible, still showing up. And then came the audition that changed everything. ABC's Moonlighting was in such trouble finding the right male lead that the network was seriously considering paying the creator, the director, and co-star Sybil Shepherd to walk away and scrap the whole thing. The role of David Addison was a problem nobody could solve. Until Bruce walked in. He beat out 3,000 other actors for the part. 3,000. And from the very first episode, something undeniable was on screen. The wit was effortless. The charm was dangerous. He played David Addison like someone who'd been keeping that character bottled up his whole life. Because honestly, he had. Every sharp comeback he couldn't say as a stuttering kid in New Jersey. Every room he was too afraid to hold. It all came pouring out. The Emmy came in 1987. Outstanding lead actor. The Golden Globe followed. Best actor in a comedy series. The bartender from Hell's Kitchen was now on the cover of magazines. The kid who couldn't speak had become the man America couldn't stop watching. Action and family. And then came John McClane. Die Hard. 1988. A movie that, if you pitch it on paper, sounds almost ridiculous. One cop, barefoot, trapped in a Los Angeles skyscraper against a group of extremely well-organized criminals. See, the studio wanted Schwarzenegger. They considered Stallone. They were looking for a myth, a mountain with muscles. They got Bruce Willis instead. And that casting choice, that decision to cast a regular guy, a wiry, wisecracking everyman who bled and panicked, and made jokes because what else were you going to do? Changed the action genre permanently. John McClane was afraid. He admitted it. He sweated through his undershirt. He got cut up, beat down, and kept going, not because he was superhuman, but because giving up wasn't something he could live with. He was heroic in the most relatable way. He was terrified and did it anyway. The audience didn't just watch John McClane. They were John McClane. And Bruce Willis understood that assignment at a cellular level because he had lived a version of it. But the kid who was afraid to speak but got on stage anyway. The guy from New Jersey who moved to New York with nothing and kept showing up to auditions. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision you make when fear is loudest. The franchise exploded. The career exploded. Pulp Fiction, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, The Fifth Element. He became one of the most bankable, most beloved, most parodied, in the best way, actors of his generation. But with that level of fame comes a particular kind of loneliness. His marriage to Demi Moore.
Bruce Willis will marry someone 23 years younger, and no one says a word.
Which produced 3 daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah, was, by both of their accounts, complicated by the relentless pressure of being 2 enormous stars trying to build a real home. They divorced in 2000. And here's the thing that always gets overlooked in the tabloid version of that story. They remained close. Co-parents. Friends. The kind of family that doesn't look like the script, but works anyway. He found love again. Emma Hemming, who he married in 2009. 2 more daughters, Mabel and Evelyn. A quieter chapter. A man who had conquered everything the industry could throw at him, now building something more private, more real. But somewhere in the background, something else was being quietly written. A different kind of script. One he didn't get to read in advance. Dementia and family. Here is where the story becomes almost unbearable to tell because it didn't happen all at once. It never does. The first sign wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a collapse on set or a public breakdown. And it was quieter than that. And that's almost what makes it worse. His wife Emma noticed that their conversations started to feel different. Their connection felt off. And at first, she blamed the most logical thing she could think of. The hearing damage Bruce had suffered on the set of Die Hard in 1988, when a gun was fired too close to him without ear protection, and he lost a significant percentage of hearing in one ear. She thought it was that. She told herself it was that. Then she noticed his stutter was coming back. The stutter he had spent decades managing, controlling, turning into something invisible. And because that stutter had always been part of him, because it had a history, a backstory, a medical explanation that predated everything, nobody immediately connected it to something darker. Emma herself said, "Never in a million years would I think it would be a form of dementia for someone so young." That's the trap of frontotemporal dementia. It doesn't announce itself. It comes on so gradually that noticing it is like watching the hands of a clock move. You know it's happening, but you can't actually see it in the moment. Meanwhile, on sets across Hollywood, something else was accumulating. Matt Eskandari, a director who worked with Bruce on 4 films in his final years, confirmed what many had quietly suspected. "I saw it while working with him the last few years. It's a sad situation, seeing a legend like Bruce deteriorating right in front of your eyes." Directors and crew members revealed that Willis relied on an earpiece to have lines fed to him in real time, needed reduced work hours, and then required body doubles for most action sequences. Reports suggest the earpiece was in use as far back as 2015, during his Broadway run in Misery. years before any public announcement. Years of the machine quietly adapting around a man whose machine was quietly breaking down. And his daughter Tallulah would later write in Vogue about her own version of that slow realization. She described noticing a vague unresponsiveness in her father, which the family chalked up to Hollywood hearing loss. Later, that unresponsiveness broadened, and she sometimes took it personally, wondering if he'd lost interest in her. She hadn't done anything wrong. Her father hadn't stopped loving her. His brain was just losing the ability to show it. According to neurologists, the average life expectancy after an FTD diagnosis is 5 years from confirmed diagnosis, with no cure and no treatment proven to slow its progression. There is no script for that, no earpiece that feeds you the right words, no director who calls cut, just family, just love, just showing up every single day for the man who once made the whole world feel like nothing could break him. Cameras have stopped rolling. The stunts are done. The explosions are quiet. But the story hasn't ended. Not by a long shot. Because heroism isn't always measured in box office numbers or unforgettable lines. Sometimes it's measured in presence, in patience, in the small, unglamorous acts that no one sees but everyone feels. Bruce Willis built a legacy that will outlive him on screen. But the question now isn't about what he made the world watch. It's about what he's teaching the world to feel. How do we honor someone whose greatest battles are no longer scripted, whose victories are measured not in applause, but in quiet courage, in being fully human? And as we sit with that, the real story, the one we've only just begun to understand, is still unfolding.